Hi, I'm Ryan Kline. I'm going to talk about teamwork today, specifically kind of how to harness teamwork to build a better game. So who am I? So I'm Ryan. I do programming, design, and production at Lazer Bread Games. We're working on our first game right now. It's a visual novel about a guy stuck in a time loop. I also work at Army Game Studio, my day job. We're developing mobile games for high schools. So I've done a lot of stuff working with people, making stuff. So that's kind of how I've come to learn a little bit about teamwork. You see me there messing with some VR, AR. That was a previous job. I had a lot of fun doing that. So, all right. So, kind of restating a little bit of yesterday's talk, like some of the obvious stuff of like, why would you want to work on a team, right? Well, a team is kind of like a sandwich. Everybody on the team is kind of like the ingredients in a sandwich, right? Like, you don't want to just eat ketchup by itself. Like, sure, that's fine, I guess, but you know, it's better put together. You can really multiply the value of the group as a whole by working together. The experience between individual members is going to contribute to the contributions of everybody else. So it's like it's not just adding on skills. You're really multiplying everyone's skills the more that you can work together, and that's the peak way to solve problems, because you can approach it from all these different dimensions that normally you couldn't by yourself. Also, it's a major morale boost for the whole team. You're going to have a good time working together. You're going to have a lot more camaraderie. You're going to be able to be more proud of the end product, and that's going to help you make a better game. And communication between members, you would think that, you know, that gets in the way. That's a hassle, trying to get everybody on the same page. But really, if you're doing it right, that's going to help you establish features that should go in the game and features that shouldn't. It's going to help you make decisions about what's good and what's bad about your game, and it's really going to make you more efficient in the end of the day, which is kind of awesome. So, my main point is that you know, there's a famous law in computer science called COWZ Law that says that the organizational structure of a team is going to be reflected in the product the team makes. Any team making like a software product or anything like that, right? So my main point is you should design your teams with the same level of intent you design your games. You should focus on the team and then maybe treat the game as auxiliary to that. Like, if your team is good, you can make good things. It doesn't so much matter what the idea is, what the design is. You can work that out with a solid team. So to that end, let's kind of look at it through the game design lens and break down how we're going to design our team as if it was a video game, right? So let's look at the mechanics first. That's our people. That's the people on the team members. So to kind of define a team member, I found this definition from the business dictionary, and I kind of like it. It's a person that belongs to a specific group of people involved in attempting to achieve a common goal. So my two takeaways from that are teams are specific groups, and being on a team means aligning your goals. And I think those are two really important pieces of that. So let's get more into those. So being specific, every person on a team needs to know their role. This is something that Nick talked about yesterday a little bit, in that they need to know what they're responsible for, what they're accountable for. Like, they need to know that, you know, if I'm on the team and my role as a programmer, I need to focus on those tasks, right? Early on in Lazer Bread, we started up with a group of guys, and we kind of were just gonna figure it out, right? It was very nebulous about who was gonna do what on the team, and it ended up being a pretty big flop because we had, you know, two versions of the script at the same time, where people were like, I didn't like the style that you wrote, so I wrote my own, and then we were like conflicting and arguing about it and arguing about direction and all that. So that kind of thing can be mitigated if you know, you bring on people for a specific purpose in mind, and you're able to establish that early. And like we said earlier, cross-discipline teams are going to be more viable to solve harder problems. So when you end up in a situation where you've got a really hard design problem that's going to require some programming knowledge as well, right? If you have experts in those areas, they can come together and communicate and figure out a good solution. Whereas if people don't know what their expertise is in, that's a lot harder to start that conversation. So I recommend, especially on a small team, get some contracts in place early that define kind of what those roles are, what milestones people are responsible for. That'll help you in a lot because now it's not a question of who's going to do the work, it's just how, right? And we'll get a little bit more into knowing your roles. This is about building trust with the team, and that'll be kind of a key point throughout my whole talk is building trust. So whenever someone knows what they're responsible for and you can respect that and you can respect their skill set, they're going to trust you more as a leader, and that's valuable because you're going to use that trust to when directions change, when schedules change, the trust that you have is going to be what you use kind of as a currency to convince them that like this is the right way to go. So defining those roles is good for that, and it's also good for effectiveness and morale. So if you're not telling someone, I know you're doing all the 2D art now, but like can we do some 3D models and like you just figure that out. Like if you don't layer that onto people, because that's going to drop their confidence that they're able to do the things that are presented to them, and it's also going to make them less effective because that's obviously not the role that they're best suited for, right? And some of the warning signs that maybe people don't know their roles, if you hear of like fighting about direction all the time, right? Like if there's no clear vision holder on your team, this goes back to like a producer like Nick said, is if you have, like we had 2 different versions of the script and you're arguing about which way it should go, that's not a good sign. You probably want to figure out why that's happening and talk about, how can we work together and communicate better so this doesn't happen. If you hear stuff like that's not my job, or why are you doing this? This is my job, or why don't I just do this for you? Those kind of things are examples of where someone's kind of stepping into other people's roles, and those are good to start, like good sentences to kind of start the conversation about that and figure that out, but that needs to be addressed. Like you can't just leave that up in the air. You definitely should address those kind of things. And so talking more about aligning your goals as a team, the whole team should come together really and decide the goals ideally. Like you need to ask everyone on the team, including yourself, like why do you want to make this game? Like is this for money? Is this for fun? Is this because this is your dream project? Those questions are important, and you need to know from everybody why they've decided that they want to work on this, or if they have decided they want to work on this, right? And if you can figure that out, you can kind of compile that, and I would write this all down and get it in a list and be like, okay, these are the core tenets of why we're making this thing, and then you can start to compile that into, if you're working on a studio, right, a studio mission statement, or for the game, core pillars for the game. As an example, for Potato Paradox Plus, our core pillars are we want the game to be accessible, we want the game to be relatable, we want the game to surprise the player, and we want the game to resonate with the player afterwards. So everything that doesn't fall into that category, we're cutting, right? And then we were able to decide that because we talked to the team to figure out what the vision is, right? And that'll help build that vision up so that you can actually execute on it and you can make effective decisions. And that also, having those short phrases of pillars, keeps everybody on that same page so you can come back around. And like I said, reiterate these, every meeting. Like it's not redundant to say it again, and sometimes it changes. So if you state it, people have a clear vision in their head of what's going on. I've been playing Destiny 2 a lot. I like Bungie. They're a good studio, and I really like the way that they do their planning. One of the things they do is, they have a big 300-person planning meeting every, I think it's every 3 months or every quarter, right? And they do this. The creative leaders get up and give a presentation on the vision of the game, the vision for the game for the next milestone, which we'll get into. But they're constantly trying to fill in the context of what's going on with the goals of the game. And so when you're deciding kind of what game to make, align your team's strength and motivations to the game idea, right? Like if you don't have a 3D artist, don't do 3D. Like this sounds obvious, but there's less obvious, versions of that, right? Like let's say you've never programmed AI before. Probably shouldn't make a completely AI-driven game that's got all these like different AI units. Like focus on what you're good at. There's enough hard stuff to figure out, right? And sometimes your strengths and motivations don't align, right? Maybe you want to do that because you want to learn about AI. That's valuable, but communicate that to the team and say, look, I'm not an AI programmer, but I want to learn this, so I'm going to do this. And if you guys are on board with it, let's try it. And that's fine too, but you need to communicate that. And goals shift also over time. So sometimes as a director or vision holder, you have to sell the idea. Tanya Sort from COWZ Games wrote a couple good articles on Gama Sutra the past couple of weeks that really hit home on this really well. But as a creative leader, you have to sell the ideas of the design changes or big design ideas. You have to convince the team, kind of like if you would pitch to a publisher, you have to pitch to your team, like, hey, this is going to be your way to learn really cool AI stuff. Like, I think we should try it, and get them excited about it and engaged in that work, and that'll be leaps and bounds. And this is where you're leaning into that trust that you're building. You're relying on them trusting you to make those right decisions. So now, when you're looking for talent, there's some things that I've done that have helped a lot. I network locally. Most of my team I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. Most of my team's from Huntsville. They're people I met in school, people I socialize with at game dev meetups. And when I say network, it's not, and a lot of people say this, it's not like some, go up and be sleazy about it. Like, just make friends. Like, go make cool game friends. Like, I'm sure you want to do that, so do it. And those people will end up being some of your greatest assets when you're working on games, and that's a lot of value. Also, I've had a lot of success just going on Twitter and just asking for help. Like, I found a writer, I found an editor that way. Just went on Twitter and hashtag writing community. Here's what I'm looking for. And I got like 3 or 4 people to reply. And I was able to actually do interviews and stuff and figure out kind of who I wanted to work with. And always pay people something, but you'd be surprised. You might think someone's kind of out of your price range, but just communicate with them like, this is what my budget is, right? Like, this is not a big budget thing, but it's a passion project. This is what we're trying to do. And some people are willing to help with that kind of thing. Some people aren't. That's fine. Be reasonable, but try to be generous with it. I recommend, what I always do is I do a cross between like money now and revenue share, and I kind of let them decide like what they want, but I'll always try to give them both, because I want them to have a stake in the final thing, but I also want them to be paid for their work, right? So I think there's a lot of value there. And you should be flexible with your schedules, especially if you have no reason to really push for a specific date. Like for Lazer Bread, we're an indie team, we're trying to release on Steam, but it's not like we have like a hard fast date. We don't have a publisher, right? We don't have anything in the works that means like, we have to release by this date, we have to have it built by this date. So if someone's, something comes up and something's not working out, be flexible about that, because it's okay. Like, the main goal is that you bring on people that you trust to do the work, and not that they get it done by this exact date, right? So as long as you trust them, just rely on that. Like, you trust them to do it, they're gonna get it done. To that same end, I've seen a lot of indie teams do stuff where they have a specific like set of hours, like you need to work 15 hours every week or whatever, right? And that's like part of their contract. Like, I don't recommend that at all, especially not part-time. Like, if you're a full-time studio, go for it. There's also, not legal advice, but there's legal problems with setting up time expectations for contractors, so that gets dicey, so don't do that. It's also just not healthy. Like, if someone can't make the 15 hours, like, do you fire them? Do you tell them to leave the team? Like, that's a morale, degradation right there for sure. And so when you're looking for people, right, in my mind, the most crucial things are up in the top, and then there's also really important things kind of at the bottom. It's really crucial that you find someone who's professional and courteous and compassionate to other people. Like, if they're a jerk, then that's just not going to work, right? Your culture starts with you, right? Like, the first person in the room starts defining the culture of your team. And if your team has someone who, like, is a jerk, or, like, the second thing, won't listen to ideas or feedback and thinks everything they write or everything they make is perfect, right? Then that's not going to work from a team dynamic perspective. And to me, that's more important than how much experience they have, or how interested they are in the project. So it's really crucial that it's someone you can work with, right? And to that end, that they can adapt their style to suit the team. Sometimes this is an experience thing. They might only be able to draw, let's say, like anime, right? And like maybe that's not what you're going for. Then that's probably not a good team member to bring onto the project. Like you want to either find someone that fits the style, or find people, which I prefer is to find people that can adjust the style to what's coming up next. Because you want to work with the same people over and over again, because that's value that you're building every time, every game, right? So you want someone that can adapt, and also they need to be able to do the work. Like if it's someone who's just gonna ghost you for months and not work on the game, and then come in and be like, oh, how's it going? Like you need to have someone who's consistent enough to work on the game, get in there, help you, and that's crucial. If you don't trust the person to do that, don't bring them on. And then other things that are important, like I said, are the expertise and experience, right? Like you can work with that, but it's important that you find someone who has a base knowledge. But people are going to grow as they make games, so it's important that you allow that to happen as well. Like if you're working in Unity and you have a programmer who's never touched it, like maybe that's okay. Maybe they can start to learn if they have programming knowledge. Like it depends on if they hit these top boxes and you really have a good chemistry with the person, maybe the experience is not as important. That's your call. And interest in the project is something, like I said, you can pitch the project to them. You can sell it, right? And that's something you should be doing all the time. And if you can do that well, then their immediate interest in the project might be less important if they're willing to work with you. And also, I think it's really important that you find people that have diverse perspectives, right? Like you don't want to hire a bunch of people that are just clones of you. You want to have the discussions about everything in your game as far as coming from different viewpoints, different disciplines, different backgrounds. That's what you want. And that'll help you build a better game in total, because it'll help you, gear more toward a bigger and more broad target audience, right? Because everybody's different. So you want different voices on your team. So that kind of covers who. So now we're going to talk more about the process, the dynamics of the game, if you will, of our team. First of all, you need a process. Like, you definitely need a process. And any process is better than no process at all. There is another set of Gamer Sutra articles and a GDC talk by Paul Trenzer, I think his name is. But anyway, it's the Games Outcomes Project. And that's a really good metric for what they did. Was they defined like a success metric based off a lot of things, including like team happiness, Metacritic scores, a bunch of other things. And they interviewed or surveyed like a bunch of teams across the industry, and they got some interesting feedback and kind of mapped the results. One of the things they ask is, what project methodology do you use? You might have heard of like Agile Scrum, Agile, the waterfall methods and stuff. And what was interesting is like it was almost just completely inconclusive. Like everybody had roughly the same outcomes, independent of whatever project methodology they used. The only one that was lower than the rest, significantly, was people who said they didn't know. They didn't know what process they had. So start with something. It doesn't super matter what it is. Do something that fits your schedule and your goals and your timelines. If you're only working 5 hours a week, probably don't need like a daily stand-up. That's probably not going to help you very much. But you can figure something out that works for you, as long as you're trying to solve these three main problems, right? That everybody on the team knows the context of the project, where it's going, what's coming next. They have an idea. These kind of are accomplished in Agile with like backlog reviews. So every 2 weeks or whatever sprint cycle you have in Agile, the whole team looks over the backlog of tasks and kind of talks about each bullet point and says like, okay, these are the kind of things that we think is going to be important coming up and we need to look out for. You also need to make it clear when there's a dependency on some other task or something is broken. So if, for example, in Lazer Bread, we're kind of waiting on a script. It's kind of a dependency that we have the script so we know what scenes we need to build. There might be some additional backgrounds that we need to do. There might be additional art we need to gen up or additional gameplay stuff we need to program. And we don't know all of those yet until we get like the rough draft of the script and we start iterating on that. So that's a dependency that we need to address and look at. Also, if like the build is broken, and you need to know that immediately so someone can fix it so the game is still in a playable state, which is beneficial for everybody. So the last thing is to make sure everybody knows what to do and when to do it. If there's anything just nebulous of, oh, we need art, and it's like, people need to know exactly what to do next, right? Like they need to know, oh, I need to do this thing next, and that's the highest dependency thing. Again, backlog reviews and planning are a good way to accomplish that, but I'm kind of coming from I prefer the agile stuff, so that's time. So when you're planning, it's useful to plan based on game milestones. Like we're gonna have a spring 2020 build, let's say. This is again something like Bungie, Criterion, a lot of big studios are doing, is they're gearing toward these milestones that are playable, and they basically decide, okay, over the next 3 months, we're going to build this part of the game, and that's our goal, and then we're going to play it at that 3-month mark and decide what to do next. And that's super useful because you're breaking down this gigantic task of making this game into making a bunch of small games. And when you're making those small games, you can say, oh, this right here does not work and it's not fun. So we need to readdress that. And so you're iterating on a smaller scale, and you're making each of those things better. And that's going to contribute to the whole being better sooner. Instead of having to say, okay, we're going to build this whole game, we're going to put all these systems on top of the dialogue system, and oh, the dialogue system doesn't work. And it's like, you don't want that. These dependencies work themselves out when you can chunk yourself into smaller pieces while you're making the game. So, at the end of these milestones, like I said, get the team together and do a team playtest. Everybody play the game. Everybody share what they worked on, talk about it, have a discussion. And at the end of all that, it's important to do kind of a retrospective, post-mortem kind of thing where you all get together and just talk about what you should start doing, stop doing, continue doing. One way that kind of agile teams do this that I think is really effective is they get together in a room. You don't need to have an actual room. It could be like a virtual room, right? And they put on sticky notes. This is what I liked that we did. We should keep doing this. Or this didn't work for me, and we need to stop doing this. And this is a thing we should do or we don't do. And then they just put those up on a wall, kind of in categories. And then someone, usually the Scrum Master or somebody, takes those off the wall and looks at all of them. And if you have any repeats, really focus on those. Like several people on the team said, we need to stop doing X. And you compare all those, you have discussions, and then come away from that with actionable things you can do to improve that. And if you do that every single milestone, your process is going to improve, and the game is going to improve, because it doesn't have to be process specific; it can be game specific to just anything, right? And then you're going to be able to clearly iterate, and then you can follow that back, like, oh, in sprint 4 we decided we're not going to do this anymore, and we're doing it again, guys. Let's fix this, right? And that'll help along with playing the game. You can build this new vision of the game every milestone. So you're looking at the next milestone, and you're thinking, okay, we need to fix all of this, platforming stuff. It doesn't work. And now you can all have that discussion and prepare for the next, block of time, next 3 months, let's say, where you're gonna fix that and then try it out again. And that helps you really kind of get to where you're going. So there's a lot of communication. I've said communication a million times. So what exactly should we do when we're communicating, right? First and foremost, everybody needs to be comfortable to speak their mind on the team. If there's anything that's coming up that's kind of blocking someone from saying something, like maybe someone gets easily frustrated or doesn't take critique well, you need to address that. You need to talk to them and say, hey, like, I know that maybe what they're saying, hurt your feelings or whatever, but try to listen to just the content and not how they're saying it. That'll help you kind of get past some of the issues that might come up. Also, if things start to get heated, kind of pull everybody down, back up, and kind of reassess the situation of like, okay, like, what is your problem? What is your problem? Let's talk about these independently. Let's work together. Like, you can kind of moderate and mediate those things that get a little too dicey. And then use your empathy. Like, you know, these are people. These are your friends, ideally. So talk to the person, understand, you know, what is it that you're trying to say, and how is what I'm trying to say best presented to you. Like, how would this person understand this discussion? This especially works like across discipline. If you're a programmer, you're talking to an artist, and you're trying to tell them like, oh, we need to drop the poly count on this thing. Try to explain like why, you know, like specifically. Like you can't just say, oh, we need it lower because it's gonna make the game run better. Like, no, like if it's this high, the frame rate will drop and the game will look poor. So I need you to make it, you know, you can come at it from an angle of like, they want the game to look good. You know that the game's not going to look good if they do it this way, and you can explain why you have to make these trade-offs using your empathy to understand, like, this is an artist, and they're not going to understand my, like, weird programmer nonsense. And then, you know, if you're talking in a meeting and, you know, like I said, stuff gets heated or stuff goes off track, that's the time for you to come in again and moderate. It happens a lot. You get in a meeting, you're talking about design, someone mentions a button looks weird, and then everybody goes off here and starts talking for like an hour. You want to keep meetings short, and so because people are going to retain the information better, so you want to mediate that stuff away and be like, okay, guys, like this is not. Let's you know, take this offline is the phrase you might have heard earlier. And that kind of phrase is useful in saying, okay, let's not talk about this right now. We can schedule another meeting. Let's just return to the topic and get that done. Because I've had so many times where we've been in meetings and we came originally to discuss something, went completely off track, and then people don't even remember what we decided about the other thing. And then now we have to have another meeting. It didn't even work. So you don't want that. So you want to get to the point. But like I said on the slide, don't leave relevant things unsaid. If there's something relevant to the problem, you need to present it, even if you think, oh, this meeting's gone too long, we need to just cut it. Like, if the meeting was about a certain thing, you need to present ideas that you have that are relevant to that thing, because you never know when you bring it up 3 months later and your programmer says, oh, that changes everything, and I have to redo all my work now. You could have said that earlier, and that could have went a lot better. So try to address things when they come up when you're communicating. Another part of communicating is reviewing people's work, especially as like a creative leader. So as a leader or even someone on the team, it's important that you review work early and you do it often. Start with sketches, you know, things that are low effort, design documents, small like write-ups on code. You want to do things super early so you can pivot away from them if they're not going to work, or you can talk about any issues. You don't want to have someone, you know, 2 weeks into something and then say, oh, oops, like, no, we can't do that. And if people are left waiting for a review, they might be blocked completely. They might not have the ability to work on another thing because they're, you know, dependent on that review to continue. So try not to leave people waiting either. It's good to have a system in place that kind of flags when something's ready for review, so someone can come in and say, oh, I'll take a look at this, and it's not up in the air. Criterion Games talked about, they have a GDC talk where they talk about the way that they approach code reviews specifically, but I think this applies to anything else too, which is they kind of have a preface for the review where they state it's one of these 3 types of reviews. So there's an update review, and that's just like, I'm just getting you on the same page. I don't need any feedback. This is just for your benefit. I'm reviewing this for you. So here you go. And then there's also like a steering review of, we have A, B, and C way to do this. We don't know what's best. What do you think? And then so you preface that. We're looking for that feedback. And then a quality review is this good enough? Do I need to improve this in any way? Like, is this ready for the game? And then you're looking for that nitty-gritty feedback, right? And this helps kind of mitigate some of the, it makes critique less harsh because people are prepared for it. The last thing you want to do is you come in to just give somebody an update. and then they just rip your stuff to pieces, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I didn't know that any of this was wrong. You know, I'm going to go back to my desk and figure it out. Ideally, that was figured out earlier in the design process, and you know, you don't want to surprise anybody when you're playing with their work and their feelings, right? You don't want to be like, surprise, like, you know, this is bad or whatever. You want to be able to broach that gently, right? And then, especially like programming, when it comes to like style and other small things, you don't need to nitpick when you're reviewing stuff. Like if they use var all the time and they're like always using a different style that they put the brackets on the wrong line or something, like that doesn't matter. Like let them have their own style, let them express themselves. This is their work. You're just here to hopefully steer it in the same way. So it's not important that you nitpick those things, and definitely don't get personal about it, like, oh, you always do this or whatever. Like that kind of stuff is super negative and bad for the team morale. So as long as it's meeting your standards and your requirements for what you need specifically for the game, it should be fine. So you don't have to nitpick, especially when they don't want you to. If they've said, this is an update, right? Okay, good. And so there are some tools that, you know, I've used that really help with all this kind of stuff. For planning, at Army Game Studio, we use Jira. Lazer Bread, we use Hack and Plan. Those are good tools. Hack and Plan has a design model built into the planning software, so you can tag tasks to specific features, and then it'll show you a progress bar when the feature is done, and that's like, it feels nice getting those complete. And then Jira's like more expensive. I think it's paid. I don't think there's really even a free. There might be, but Hack and Plan and Trello are a little more price friendly. Trello even more so. Trello is mostly just like cards. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty small scale. But for iteration and milestones, you should definitely be using version control. If you're not, look that up. You should use it. Things like Git, Perforce are going to help you distribute your software across multiple people on the team, work together, not lose it if your computer crashes. Use these things. And then if you're going to be on PC, you're going to be on Steam. We have had a lot of success with Steam as far as we got in on our page early, and they'll allow you to upload builds, and you can ask for developer keys, and so your whole team can have the game in their Steam library ready to go. And then using Jenkins, which is kind of like an automation software, you can push builds straight to Steam without even having to like worry about it. So your latest build could be just on Steam at all times, and when your team goes to play the playtest during the planning meeting, it's already there. You're good to go. It's one click. So I recommend that if you're going to be on PC. On mobile, there's stuff like Test Flight for iOS that does a similar thing. Android is a little bit more dicey, but you can do, there's some stuff for Google Play that you can do that'll help you get there. For reviews, GitLabs, GitHubs, they have a way to do reviews there. It's nice. Swarm is a similar thing for Perforce. And those are just tools that they kind of highlight the differences in code files, and they show you like, you know, this changed. And you can tag specific lines and write comments and say, hey, you know, we shouldn't do this. We should do it a different way, or whatever you need to say. And that's super good for code. And then for reviews for other stuff, you can use Google Drive or Dropbox or SharePoint or whatever. Google Drive is what we use at Lazer Bread. And there's actually, if you dig a little bit, you can version stuff in Google Drive, and that's useful. So I recommend doing that. You can write a script, version it, make comments. So that's a good tool for that. And then for staying updated, we use Discord. At AGS we use Steam because we're on a base and it's hard to get stuff approved. But Discord's cool. I recommend it a lot because your community can get involved too in seeing what you're doing. And you kind of, all in one place, you have what almost amounts to a dev blog and your status updates, and you don't have to do extra work. It's all together, which is awesome. Be careful, though, if you're making a narrative-based game, make sure that you keep narrative stuff in Google Drive and that you only let your team access those, because we've had that problem before. We're like spoiling stuff for the game in the Google Drive. So you want to make sure that's cleared up. It's not hard to do. Just take some Googling. So that's kind of the process suggestions that I have. And for the aesthetics of the team, the juice of the team, if we will, we're going to talk a little bit about motivation, and we're going to talk about culture in general. So for motivation, there's a book by a guy named Dan Pink called Drive, that's mentioned in the Criterion GDC talk I mentioned earlier. And he breaks down motivation into 3 major things that motivate people. And that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each of those. So autonomy, right? People want autonomy over what they're doing. They want to decide what they get to do. And that's over these 3 things in particular, which are task, team, and technique. So autonomy over their tasks, right? They want to choose what to work on. They don't want to be told, you're going to do all the grunt work, here you go, right? They want to be told, they want to pick, like maybe they do want to do the grunt work, but they want to pick that, right? They want to have a say. So that's totally doable. It may sound like it's not, but as long as your team has good context and they know what's coming and what they should be doing, they should be able to pick their own work. Just don't let them wander too far, and make sure they have the context they need to make the right decisions in the game. And it could be that you're picking between A, B, and C. That's generally how it's going to be, and that's fine. They still get a choice, and that motivates people. Autonomy over the team. So for small teams, this is kind of almost redundant because they're going to work with you, right? You're a small team, but they should be choosing to work with you. They should want to work with you. And so, on bigger teams, people sometimes have systems where teams can decide how to organize based off, they have a giant group of developers, and these developers cluster together to work on something, and these ones cluster together. So for like an indie team of 5 people, like it's just you guys, but you should choose your team. So they should be actively happy and supportive of working with you. And so that comes down to the trust and the respect that you show them, and just making it fun for them. And if you can manage those things, that'll motivate them to work with you. For techniques, they want to choose how they implement something, right? Or how they design something, or how they draw something. You shouldn't have to tell them the nitty-gritty detail. They call this micromanaging all the time, right? You're going in there and you're saying, you need to specifically do it this way. Don't do that. Just let them decide how to do it. And this goes back to what I was saying with reviews, which is like, let them have their style, their methods. Don't worry about the nitty-gritty of how they write their code, or how they manage their Photoshop tools or whatever. Like, that's not important to you. You care about the end product. You care about what's going in the game as a creative leader. So let them have that autonomy over their technique, and that'll help a lot for motivating them. So for mastery, it's pretty obvious, I think, that people want to be great at things. They want to get better, and they want to be the best they can be at anything, right, that they set their mind to. So your game should challenge your team and offer that to them as a vehicle to get better, right? So I would ask these questions as often as you can. Is the team interested enough in this game to really challenge themselves on it? We had a situation at Lazer Bread where we were working with an artist, and we kind of did this setup where we were going to work on their game programming-wise, and they were going to work on our game art-wise, and we were just going to kind of meet each other's needs. And that's exactly what happened. We met each other's base needs, and we didn't deliver anything fantastic to each other. Like, the art wasn't jumping out awesome. My gameplay programming stunk. So we weren't interested enough in each other's projects to challenge ourselves with the project. Which is also, side note, I recommend any sort of contract that goes beyond, like, we're just going to pay you for the work, don't do it. Just stick with, here's the money, do the work, we're good, right? Maybe revenue share, right? But other than that, there's no reason to get more complicated than that. And if it has to, then maybe reconsider working with that person. And is the person capable of doing the work that would challenge them? If, again, I keep going back to this example, but if you're making a 2D game or a 3D game, and you're working with an artist that has, like, literally never done that before, they're probably not even at the level where they can really challenge themselves at all in the game. It's so challenging, it's out of their league. They can't even begin to work on it. So you're trying to meet a happy medium where it's not trivial, but it's not so hard that they don't have the tools they need to get it done. And maybe that means if you really want to do the 3D game that you let them go off for 6 months and just do like Udemy videos on Blender or whatever, and you get that out of the way. But, you know, you have to be prepared to let them do the work, right? And, you know, is this what they want to be good at? Do they want to be good at 3D modeling? Do they even care? If they don't care, it'll show, right? They won't care, and it'll be very obvious when you get the assets, like, oh, this person is not interested in this. So this all comes back again to asking why you want to meet these goals for these people, and kind of drives into the next thing, which is purpose. When you ask someone why in the beginning, you need to follow up on that and help them fulfill that goal. It's not just knowing it, it's helping them reach it, right? And that's their greater purpose in working on the team, and that's a huge motivator for people. Most people want to make a difference in other people's lives, in their own life. They want to do something that's important. So, you know, again, more questions you can ask is, how does this game improve the players' lives? Like, what about this game makes people happy, makes people sad, makes them think about something that you want to convey? And, you know, what does it mean to our players? Is this something heavy? Is this something lighthearted? Is this something that's really gonna resonate with our players, or is it just kind of like a fun throwaway thing that they're gonna have a good time with? Is that what your team wants? And then what does that game mean to us as a team? You know, is this the message we want to give the players? You know, do we want to make this mobile game with microtransactions in it? Is that like our deep calling? Maybe so. I don't know. But if you don't feel strongly about this purpose that you've defined for yourself, it's probably not right. If it doesn't make you tear up a little bit thinking about it, you don't get cheesy about it, it's probably not the right one, right? You want to feel something when you think about this, right? Otherwise, you know, why are you making games anyway, right? If you don't feel something about a reason to make games, you need to dig a little deeper. And that'll help you motivate yourself and motivate everybody around you. That's super important. So another big takeaway, right? Like I said earlier, the culture of your studio and your player community starts immediately with the first person in the room, and the way that person interacts with the second person in the room, and so on and so forth. So how can we do some things that might benefit our culture positively? What we like to do is engage with our players. So things like Siege are great. The indie cluster outside, they're doing a great job engaging with some players. I think that's awesome. We came last year with Potato Paradox Plus. Even if it wasn't like super ready to show, we had a good time, and we think it's worth doing because you're again helping your culture of, you know, this is how we're going to talk to our players. This is the stuff we're going to try out with our players. This is how we're going to pitch our game. And you're also helping motivate your team by showing them those purpose things are getting met. They say, oh, these players really like this game. They like these things about this game. And we learned all kinds of stuff about Potato Paradox Plus that we had no idea were going to interest people. And, you know, for one, children, like smaller children, loved the game. And we're like, oh, okay, we didn't expect that. And that was really cool and really positive. And we were like, oh, well, maybe we take that back to the design table, you know, think about that a little bit. So engaging with your players helps build a culture immediately because you start to work out all those kinds of things. Take some photos of what you're doing. It's always fun. It makes the team proud to see that people care about the game. And a proud team is a happy team, and a happy team is, you know, going to build a better culture, right? And, you know, it gives your team a chance if you can all get together and do this and go to a conference or go to a show. That's going to help you build some camaraderie, you know, humanize with each other. And, you know, again, coming back, this is kind of like a catch-all slide in a way, because we're also coming back to selling the game idea. We're showing the game to players, and we're selling the game idea to the team by saying, look, these players are all about what you said you wanted, and the game is working, and that's a huge morale boost. Here's us at Hema Con in Huntsville. It's an anime convention. We did a fun thing where, and we did this last year here, where we built little potato figurines out of craft kits, and that was fun. We had a bunch of them from last year. I should put more pictures up, but it's just great fun. And again, that's another thing the kids loved. I don't even know if they really loved the game as much as they loved the potato crafting thing, but either way, I was stoked. So we had a good time. Stay positive, right? Like in general in life, it's important to stay positive about. Game development can really turn into a grind. But if you just stay positive about the direction and don't let your positivity falter, stay tenacious about it, like that'll help you a lot. And part of staying positive is doing things with your team. Those are people, those are your friends, hopefully, like I said. Get together, play other video games that have nothing to do with your game. Like go bowling. I don't care what you do. Do something cool. Have fun. And then, part of staying positive is, when something goes wrong, you don't have to dwell on the problems. Just fix the problems. Just focus on what went right. Talk about what went right. I keep bringing up Criterion. They have a wall of awesome that they do every milestone. And they just stick giant stuff that's like, we did this and it was great. And then they all high five each other. And it's cheesy as heck and it's awesome. And like, I think it's great that they stay positive and focus on what's working. And they just fix the things that are wrong. They don't worry about it so much. And part of that's complimenting each other's work. If someone does something good, like tell them, like, hey, this is awesome art. Like, or the players at the last convention all commented on this gameplay feature, and you did a great job with that. That's great, And you can't always be positive. So if you're having a bad day, if something's really getting you down, and you're going to go into a meeting with some kind of built up something, just say something about it. Say, hey, I might be a little bit standoffish today. I'm sorry. And that'll go a long way in explaining to the team why something might happen. You don't want to go in there and you just start yelling at somebody because you're upset and they don't know what happened or why, right? Like that's a very negative thing. They might think it's because of them. They might think it's because of the work. That might ruin the team dynamic forever. So if you are having a bad day, just be open and honest about it. Again, communicate. All right. So kind of closing up, really, you just want to do these things. You want to make some friends, make a lot of friends. That's networking, right? Cool people that make games that do things differently than you, that think differently than you. Gather some of those people together and start aligning your goals toward a common thing. And then when you're working on your games, work just as hard on how you make the game as you do, what game you're making or the game itself. Definitely show everyone the respect they deserve, right? You need to respect each other. Use some empathy in your communications with each other. That's super important. You're humans. You're working on things together. You're all trying to get to the same goal. Earn their trust. Really do what you can to make them believe in you as a leader and you as a team. And stop working alone. Like, don't do it. Go find some people to work with. You're going to make a better game. There's no reason to work alone. There's so many cool people here, even. Just start up a conversation and just try something, right? There's no downside. So with that, I will open it up for questions. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Lazer Bread Ryan. We post some stuff about our game, and I'll retweet some stuff from AGS sometimes. So yeah, that's what I got. So thank you. So for me, it's a little bit of, there's an answer for games in general, and there's an answer for this game we're working on now. But for games in general, as a kid, I played a lot of video games that kind of mirrored things that were happening in my life, and they helped explain things to me. Like the gameplay mechanics were microcosms where I could kind of get a sense of what was wrong or what was happening in my life that I didn't understand, And if I could do that for just like one kid who like is having trouble, doesn't understand something, and I could just show them like a way to gather that understanding, and they could have that, then I've done like everything I've ever wanted to do. And for this game in particular, it's kind of a game about this guy who's stuck in a rut, right? And he's stuck in college, stuck in this practice job, and it's kind of a game about how your perspective is everything. So showing a young student or something like, hey, you know, maybe it's just the way you're looking at this. Maybe you should reconsider, be a little more positive about things around you, and it might turn out better, right? If I could show somebody that with my game, then I'm stoked. So that's why I do it. Yeah. So.
Earlier when you were talking about imagery, I suppose warning sometimes I can recognize myself like that underlying drive to feel like, oh, if I was just doing it, it'd be exactly the way I want it. How do you acknowledge that and practice those things?
I think that there's a conversation to be had there. If you feel like that, maybe sit down and just talk to the person. And it's going to be a tricky conversation to navigate because you know you do have that emotional kind of something welled up within you. And I always say a really key component of if you ever feel really emotionally about something, just don't say anything for a little while. Just wait. Like if you see something and you have this gut reaction of, oh my gosh, they've just ruined it. Don't just back away. Come back tomorrow. If you still feel the same way, it'll at least be dimmed a little bit, and you'll be able to communicate a little better about it. And you can just give up some kind of like, hey, I have some ideas about this. Would you like some feedback? And then you guys can talk about kind of where it's going. Also, it comes down to the team trusting. Like I know student projects, there's a lot of times where like there's just people that just aren't working on it, or that happens, right? And you can't always pick your student teams. Sometimes you do have to just get in there and do the work if they're not even present. So but don't carry it over to someone that you actually do trust and chose to work with, right? Because that kind of stuff, you can have better conversations than just taking it, doing it. It's more about transparency and clarity than it is about how good it turns out in the end. Because if you can get the person on the right track, they're going to do way more work than you could ever do as their job and your job, right? Yeah, again, that's where the context is super important. If they understand that context, hopefully they'll make the right decisions on what to work on next. Again, you can present them like, we need to build these 3 systems. Which one do you want to start with? Or whatever. Like if there's one programmer, they're going to be doing all of it, right? Or if there's a couple, you can divvy out like, who wants to do this one and that kind of thing. If they have good context, they'll be able to make good decisions. But if they're making poor decisions, you need to reiterate the context. That, hey, we can't really work on this right now because the deadline is coming up in 2 months. Like, we need to push this off. If you can reiterate that and be empathetic about how they might understand it, they can be like, oh, okay, like I'll put that down for now. And you give them, if they really want to work on it, be like, hey, let's push it off until after the deadline, and then we can continue working on it. But right now, we really need to focus on these 3 things, these core things. That again helps with if you are keeping regular status of what each other is working on, you'll catch it early. I know I've had things where someone might go off in the weeds on some task, and the leadership doesn't even know that they're working on that, and they'll be off in the weeds for like a week, and they'll come back and be like, oh, you've been working on this for a week? Like, oh my gosh, like stop. And you don't want to surprise somebody with that, right? Like they got to wind down now and then wind back up on the other thing, and so you catch it early with like status updates and say, oh hey, you need to move goals here, you need to go more this way. I think that's a good way to handle it. So kind of like, I guess you're saying the leadership on the project is giving you direction that you can't take because they don't understand maybe like what you're working on. Yeah, it's hard. You just have to try to tell them like one good way I would say is to kind of offer what you can do. Like don't say I can't do that. I can't do that. Right? Say okay, I can do this or I can do this. I can't do both. Like these are what I can give you. And maybe offer a solution of like if I got another programmer, he could knock out this other part or she could knock out this other part, but I can knock out this part, and then we'll intervene in the middle and we'll figure something out. But yeah, stay positive. They don't want to hear like no, I'm not going to do it because again it's how are they going to understand it? They might see that as you just saying I don't want to do it. If you can convince them that that's not the reason, like the reason is I don't have the time, and you explain that. Context goes the other way too. You got to give the leadership context about what you're able to do and what you're working on, and that should help. Just staying positive there, I would say. Cool. There's nothing else. I guess that's all. Sure.
I was talking a few days ago with someone about self-fulfillment syndrome, the idea that you are so passionate about your work and so attached to the vision that you lose the willingness to change it. And the reason I brought it up is because I got kind of conflicting advice on that. But you said sometimes it's better to work on things that you aren't as passionate about, because that way it's easier to let go when someone says this is bad. I was just wondering what your take was on that.
Yeah, so for the cameras, he's saying that sometimes if you're so passionate about a game, it's hard to change direction, and he had gotten advice to say you should work on games you're less passionate about so it's easier to change direction. I think that's fair advice to an extent, and the reason being is because you don't need to hold the vision in your own head as like your own thing, right? You need to recognize that this is a team effort and this is a team vision, and if there's something you're super passionate about that's a part of that, sometimes you're going to lose the argument, right? Like sometimes that's just not the way the rest of the team wants to go, and you have to kind of come to terms with that. That's more of a introspective, like how you can work on yourself kind of thing. Is you do want to get attached to the project, but not so attached that you don't want to change things that the whole team has agreed are not good for the game. So you got to give up a little bit of your ownership of the thing to the collective in a way. And I think that's the best way to handle that kind of thing. It's a self kind of problem. And then we have that a lot, like at my studio. People are really passionate about stuff, and they might pick. It's always strange. It's like a specific feature that they're just like, this has to be this way, and like it turns into like an argument about direction again. And that's just, you have to be willing to say, I lost. It's fine. The game will be better for it. You have to believe that, and that's that part of that trust too. All right. Thanks, guys. Have fun.